A 20-year-old woman complained to her father that her chest hurts shortly after him making her a cup of tea, and then suddenly she collapsed in her father's arms and dies. As of the most recent report, there is no official explanation for what went wrong. Meanwhile, a former athlete, 50-year-old Emmanuel Boybits Victoria, died of a heart attack on Wednesday. Emmanuel had been in the news 4 years ago after it was disclosed he was suffering from Guillain-Barre syndrome prior to the pandemic. Well, that is going to be the subject of today's episode. And so from Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and our episode is starting right now. So, 20-year-old Libbey Peverall, who is described as a beautiful young woman and who was not known to have any underlying health conditions, collapsed and died suddenly in her father's arm in her home in West Drayton, London, last week. According to her brother, Charlie, who spoke with the media, he said his sister had woke up on Monday, and my dad said, "Do you want a cup of coffee?" She always had coffee in the morning, and she said she'd rather have a cup of tea. So he made her a cup of tea, and then all of a sudden she said, "I've got a pain in my chest." She suffers from panic attacks, so my dad gave her a brown bag to blow in, and basically she just stood up and then collapsed in my dad's arms. My dad really did try his hardest to help her, and he did CPR on her and everything. He tried so hard. Within about 5 or 10 minutes, ambulances turned up, and they tried on her for about an hour and a half with my mom and dad going, "Please don't give up on her. Please don't give up." According to a report by the UK Daily Mail, Charlie received a call a short while later to say that Libbey was suffering a suspected heart attack and was no longer breathing. He jumped in the car and had reached St. Albans when his mother told him that she had sadly passed away. Charlie said that he had screamed in his car. It hit him so hard. He said, "We did everything together. We did football together, and just before Christmas we went to Winter Wonderland together. She was my only sibling, and everyone says, I know how you feel, but until it happens to someone, which I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, you don't know how it feels. My mom is in bits. I'm trying to stay strong for her, and it feels like I haven't properly grieved yet. It just feels like she's on holiday, and she's going to walk through the door soon. For the last 2 days, it's starting to feel like reality a bit. I'm just trying to deny it in a way." Now, as at the time of filming for this episode, the family is still awaiting the coroner's report before they begin to organize her funeral. Her brother Charlie, meanwhile, set up a GoFundMe page to help pay for her funeral expenses so that they can, as he put it, give her the day she deserves. Despite the family's heartbreak, they only have kind words for the London Ambulance Service, who worked tirelessly to try and bring Libbey back to life. Charlie said on the incident that, "My mum suffered a heart attack just after Libbey was born, so they're trying to find out if it's in the family. They've never seen anything like this at the age of 20. It even shocked the paramedics. They really did try their hardest to bring her back. I've never known paramedics to come up to you and not want to leave. It was unbelievable how supportive they were." According to the Daily Mail, Libbey, who had aspirations of becoming a beautician, was described as loved by all who knew her, and her shocking death on February 20th has devastated her parents and brother. The Daily Mail also said that Libbey had suffered severe bullying at her school, which she left to be homeschooled from the age of 14 on. She remained living in fear of her bullies, who still targeted her despite attempts to distance herself, and it led her to developing mental health issues. Despite this, Libbey had everything going for her and had recently passed her driving test and devoted her time to her dog, Lottie. She was a huge football fan and a supporter of Manchester City, but regularly accompanied Charlie to watch Chelsea FC in West London. A horrible, traumatic experience for everyone involved. Meanwhile, as reported by CNN, basketball legend Emmanuel Boybits Victoria died on Wednesday after suffering from a heart attack, this according to his family. They said that it's with a heavy heart that we announce our dad's death from acute myocardial infarction, and he was pronounced dead at 6:55 p.m. at San Juan de Dios, Manila. According to his daughter, the 7-time PBA champion also had a heart attack just 2 weeks ago. As she put it, he had a heart attack last February 14th, and they discovered the acute myocardial infarction, and then he had another heart attack last night. Now this then brings us to Forbes magazine, which on February 20th published an article which discussed at length the causes of cardiac arrest and what signs to watch for. They said that cardiac arrest is a serious and life-threatening event that affects over 356,000 Americans annually, with 90% of cases being fatal. Now, the health condition is top of mind for many, particularly football fans, as Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin, 24, collapsed on the field during a January 2nd game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the article goes on to explain why cardiac arrests happen to young people. Their explanations involve everything except discussions on myocarditis, COVID-19, or the mRNA vaccine. Here is a sample of how that went. They wrote that another possible cause of cardiac arrest in young, healthy athletes specifically is called commotio cordis, which occurs when the heart stops pumping due to a low, mild chest wall impact. The impact, which can be caused by a wayward baseball, hockey puck, or martial arts move, among others, interrupts the regular heart rhythm and causes a dangerous arrhythmia. According to Dr. Gerges, while an official cause is still pending, commotio cordis may be responsible for the sudden cardiac arrest experienced by Hamlin. Because Hamlin is a professional athlete who likely underwent thorough cardiac evaluations, it is highly unlikely he had a structural abnormality that was missed. Clearly, the public consciousness about cardiac arrests, particularly in young people, is at an all-time high. It is becoming increasingly difficult for major news networks to ignore. Now, the reason why I bring up the Forbes article is I want to point out the attitude shift from this most recent one from Forbes compared to the type of coverage that we got just 2 months ago. What I'm referring to is an article by Forbes published back on January 14th, not long after the infamous Damar Hamlin cardiac arrest incident on national television. The piece was titled, "Have More Athletes Died Suddenly Since COVID-19 Vaccines Arrived? Such Claims Lack Evidence." Bruce Lee, who is the senior contributor in this hit piece, attempted to mock the rising concern over cardiac arrests. He wrote that if you are going to claim that more athletes have been suffering cardiac arrests and dying over the past 2 years, you had better sport some real numbers. Some real, legitimate, verifiable numbers. And he pointed to the Fox News Tucker Carlson show, saying that he, Tucker, asserted that cardiologist Peter McCullough and researcher Panagis Polakritis looked into this trend in Europe, the European sports leagues. They found that prior to COVID and the COVID-19 vaccines, there were roughly 29 cardiac arrests in those European sports leagues per year. Carlson went on to claim that since the Vax campaign began, there have been more than 1,500 total cardiac arrests in those leagues, and 2/3 of those were fatal. Bruce went on to say that, does this sound like McCullough, a cardiologist who was not really known as an infectious disease expert or a public health researcher before the pandemic, and Polakritis, a biologist, actually conducted a real scientific study? Maybe even a peer-reviewed study. It looks like they didn't, though, and instead all they did was write a letter to the editor published in the Scandinavian Journal of Immunology. It doesn't take much to write a letter to the editor for such a journal. You have to be able to write, which may rule out some kids below the age of 5. It helps to have an internet connection as well, and you really should have an email address, otherwise the bar is not super high. Now, the rest of this article does its level best to discredit and mock all involved in that story. But my oh my, how times have changed. Instead of the story going away, it has in fact become much bigger and more prevalent in the public discourse, which is why now we see so many pieces from news media eager to get involved. It will be very interesting to see how the attitude on the subject continues to shift as time moves forward. Naturally, we'll be keeping you posted on the story as it does develop. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. For more content like this, be sure to check back to this channel daily, Monday through Friday, or if you'd like written content, check us out at trialsitenews.com, 7 days a week, every day. And as ever, always, my friends, thank you so much for joining me on the program today. From Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.